In this video, we're going to look at this distance formula, and we're going to use it to find the distance between 2 points. Now, this is just an example, and just similar to what you have on your paper, and notice that we have one ordered pair here, and it's 4, 8. We have an x and a y value, and then we have 1, 2, our second ordered pair with an x and a y value. Now, when I say ordered pair, just remember that an ordered pair has an x value, and then the second number is your y value. And this is just its location on a coordinate plane. For instance, if we had this graph, and we had a line going through it, and let's say one of our points was right here, the x value would be the x line that it lines up with on the x-axis, while the y value would be the location that it lines up with on the y-axis. So that's how we get that x and y. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this formula above, and we're going to substitute in our x and y values. But there's a couple steps that you need to follow in order to do this successfully. First, I'm going to go and write step 1. On step 1, you need to go ahead and you need to write this formula out, but put parentheses in place of the variables. So I'm going to do that real quick. So I have d is equal to the square root of, and put my first parentheses. Now, instead of putting x squared again, I'm going to put a set of parentheses for x. I'll say x squared, x sub 2. And then I'm going to put minus my x1. And then I'm going to close parenthesis on it, because remember, these two variables are inside of a set of parentheses that are closed. And then they're going to be squared, and then it's going to be added to our y values. So for that one, I'm going to go ahead and put for y2, I'm just going to put a set of parentheses. We will substitute a number in there in just a moment. Y minus my y1, and then close parenthesis, and then we're going to square that as well. So I've gotten this written out, but instead of putting the letters, right, the variable, I just left a parenthesis. So now we're going to go ahead and go to the next step. So step 2, I'm going to put label ordered pairs. Now, when I say label ordered pairs, I recommend that you go up to the ordered pairs that are on your paper and just label the first set x and y, and then the next one x2 and y2. And that way you can make sure you put the right number in the right place. Step 3, I'm going to move this down just a little bit, is you're going to substitute the values. So we're going to go ahead and substitute. When I say substitute, we're going to take this number, we're going to put it in the place where x1 would go, and so on. So I'm going to start with the x2 value. The reason I'm starting with x2 is because in my formula it says put x2 first, right? x2 minus x1. Well, my x2 value, I'm going to circle it as I write it, is a positive 1. So I'm going to put a 1 inside of here. If this were a negative number, I would put the negative sign in front of that number inside of the parenthesis. But because it's positive, I'm just going to put my positive 1 there. In my next variable, notice it says x1. So for this next set of parentheses, I'm going to put the x1 value, which is this 4 right here. That's my x1. So I'm going to put 4. And then the next value we're going to substitute is going to be our y2 value. So I'm going to circle the y2 value of 2 and write that in there. And then the next one we're going to substitute is our y1 value. So I'm going to go over to my y1, which is 8. And I'm going to put that in there. So now all my values have been substituted. I substituted the value in place of the variable. Now notice I did circle them as I was putting them in. That'll make sure that you don't accidentally mix anything up, and that you account for every one of your values that you have for x1, y1, and x2, y2. Now let's go ahead and go to the next step. So we don't need the equation anymore. We have our values substituted. It's just a matter of doing the math now. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to write d equals because we're going to get some values here. Now I'm going to show you a shortcut. Instead of us having to put all this, now if you were to put all this in a calculator, sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. Sometimes what will happen is if there's negative values in here, when you put that negative value inside of a radical, the calculator will give you an error. So what I recommend doing is leave the radical off until the last step, but put all these values in there. In other words, when I say put all the values, you're going to see me enter everything that's inside of the radical without the radical symbol initially. So I'm going to do that right quick. So I'm going to put my calculator right here. I'm going to put my first parenthesis and my second parenthesis, because we have parenthesis, parenthesis, 1. I'll put a 1 in there, close parenthesis, minus parenthesis, and then I'm going to put my 4, so 4, close parenthesis, then I'm going to close it again, and I'm going to hit the squared button. Now to get that little square symbol up there, you have to hit the one that says x2. X has a little 2 on top. We call that x squared, or x to the second power. When you click it, you're going to see a little power of 2 and the exponent pop up right there. Now I'll hit minus again. Let me rephrase that. Actually, let me change that. We have a plus, so not minus. I apologize. It's going to be plus. And then we're going to put our next parenthesis and our next one. And then we're going to put the 2. So 2 and another parenthesis. By the way, if you're not sure where the parentheses are, they're right here above the 8 and 9. So put it in there. And then it says minus, so I'm going to hit the minus button. And then parenthesis, 8, parenthesis. And then it's another parenthesis. And then I'm going to square it. So I'm going to hit that x squared, or x to the power of 2. So notice, I didn't put the radical. When I say radical, right, I didn't put the little square root symbol. But you can notice that I have all the numbers that are inside of that radical right there. And I'm going to hit enter. And it's going to give me a value. And it said it's 45. So I'm going to simply write that right here. So this is 45. So now that I got that done, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the square root of 45 and see what it gives me. So I'm going to go ahead, and to do that, I'm going to hit second button up here and then go down to the x squared button. Notice there's a little radical symbol on top of it. When you hit that, after hitting the blue button, it puts that radical symbol in. I'm going to type in my 45, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And notice it gives me this value, 6.7. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to write that answer. So I'm going to go ahead and write D is equal to 6.708. Now, from this point, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and I'm going to round to the tens place. So I'm going to write right here, round to tenths place. And to do that, now if you forgot, when we're talking about places, I'm going to rewrite this number and I'll show you what the tenths place is, 6.708. This first place is my tenths place. The second place, we call that the hundredths. And the last one is called the thousands. Thousands. So since we said round to the tenths, I'm going to underline that 7 right there. And I'm going to circle the number. And the rule, we have this rule and it says 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. So in other words, since this is 4 or less, this second number that's in the hundreds place, that tells me to let the 7 rest so I don't change it. So my final answer will be D is equal to 6.7. Now on the other hand, let's say that this is 0. If this 0 was a 6, then I would have changed the 7 to an 8. But because it's a number that's 4 or less, I let it stay 7. And that's how we round. So this is what you need to know in order to do one of these problems. Follow those steps and you'll be able to get the problem right every time.